Hey guys, Modelling Weekly here. Following very high demand, this week's tutorial video will be themed around the wonderfully versatile world of oil paints. I'll be comprehensively running through every step in the process, hopefully leaving you guys with a much better understanding of why they're so helpful to scale modelers and how to tackle them. A couple of years back, I made a beginner's guide to a handful of oil paint weathering techniques. However, I didn't go into much detail with respect to oil washes in particular, so let's do that now. Enjoy! Before I get into any of the details, I'll just quickly run through the reasons why oil washes are such a good choice for us modelers. First and foremost, they're super cheap in the long run. A few tubes of oil paint might set you back £10 or £15, however that could last you years depending on how many models you build. On top of this, they're fantastic for blending, as well as creating sharp edges around your panel lines, so you're able to get a really versatile range of effects out of them. The ability to mix your own shades of washes is also a very valuable attribute, which I'll run through in a bit more detail later in the video. For now though, let's crack on with the guide. The question you're probably asking to begin with is, which brand do you buy? To this, there's a wide range of options to choose from depending on budget and preference. Personally, my favourite brand at the moment is Abteilung 502, as the pigment and binder quality is very high, and I've managed to achieve some lovely gradients with it. They're a bit pricey however, so a potential alternative if you're on a tighter budget would be Winsor & Newton or Winton oil paints. These are available in value packs which are often on sale on Amazon, so they're a great starting point for beginners. They're not as refined as Abteilung 502, however they're fantastic value for money whilst still retaining a very acceptable quality. When it comes to thinners, you're again faced with a bit of a choice. White Spirit, Artists Thinners and purpose-made modelling thinners are all valid options, however in my experience the differences between them are fairly minimal, whilst the price very much isn't. I almost exclusively use White Spirit or Mineral Spirit if you're from across the pond, which is excellent value for money. It allows for some pretty nice blending as well, albeit not as smooth as Artists Thinners. However, this difference is tiny as I said earlier, so I'm not planning on ditching the White Spirit anytime soon. Once you've got the paint and thinners nailed, you'll want to start thinking about which colours fit best with the paint scheme that you'll be weathering. For the majority of cases, I would never recommend a purely black or purely white wash, as the contrast that this creates is far too stark in a lot of cases, with very few exceptions. For most models, however, you can't go wrong with a sepia wash, which provides a lovely balance between dark and warm tones, which also provides a nice amount of contrast. You can also add some dark blue, green or yellow to your sepia shade in order to control the tone even more. By adding cold colours like green and blue, it shifts the colour balance of the wash away from the warm nature of the plain sepia, whilst adding yellow or even red can help to enhance it. Experimenting with these shades on test models is the best way to find out what you like the most. In cases where you're weathering a dark colour however, like on a night fighter, you'll want a much lighter shade in order to push the contrast in the opposite direction, and so the wash actually does something. A light brown, light grey or even off-white tone is perfect for your black, dark grey or even dark green models. We're almost ready to apply some washes now, but what do you apply them with? Well, you can use literally any brush you want. Sable, synthetic sable and ordinary synthetic brushes are all perfectly usable, so it just depends on what type of brushes you have at your disposal. You'll want a brush with a nice point however, which can also carry a decent amount of wash so that you're not constantly going back to the pot in order to refill the brush. Don't go too big though, as a big brush can ruin your control over the wash. The final stage before wash application is the surface prep. A lot of you asked in my previous video about whether or not a varnish is required, and if so, does the type of varnish matter? Well, the answer is yes. Whilst it's not technically necessary for acrylic and lacquer-based undercoats, I'd still recommend slapping a varnish layer on, as it allows you to control the way the wash interacts with the surface, which is super valuable. This is where the type of varnish comes in. Whilst it doesn't matter if the varnish is acrylic, lacquer or enamel, it does matter if it's matte, satin or gloss. A gloss surface will essentially act as an oil repellent, so it's perfect if you only want the wash to stay in the panel lines. however far from ideal if you're planning on blending in the excess. On the other hand, a matte varnish will act as a sponge, making blending much easier around the panel lines. The only problem with a matte varnish, however, is that it can take quite a while to remove the excess wash, as the grip between it and the varnish is so strong. Sometimes it's impossible to blend in all the excess, so you have to act pretty fast after application. As a result, my favourite finish for general weathering is a satin coat. It allows for a nice amount of blending, whilst also allowing for easy manipulation, so you don't have to worry about any nasty oil stains anytime soon. As always, the finish you apply to the model heavily depends on what the model is, along with your desired effect. Just make sure you allow the full time for the varnish to cure before doing any weathering on top of it. Right, let's apply some wash at last. Making the wash is luckily a very simple process. You'll first want to apply the oil paint to a piece of cardboard and let it sit for an hour or two, allowing the excess oil to seep out, preventing excessive drying times and issues in the blending process. Then simply transfer the oil paint to a small mixing pot and add your chosen thinner until you're left with a milk-like consistency. Then load up your brush and apply it to any surface features on the model. You'll immediately notice that capillary action is your friend in this situation, helping to pull the wash down the panel lines. As a result, you only need to touch the brush against the surface in order to achieve an even spread of wash. Once it's all applied, make sure to leave the thinners to evaporate for 15 or 20 minutes before removing any excess in an environment at about room temperature. When it comes to cleaning up the excess, you're again met with a choice. If you plan to remove all the excess completely, which would work best with a gloss undercoat, then the most effective solution is to coat a cotton bud or paper towel with white spirit or thinners and to wipe this along the surface perpendicular to the panel lines. Make sure you don't go in the same direction as the panel lines, as this will remove the wash that you want to keep inside them. If you do remove some wash by mistake, however, then you can always go back and add some more. If you're planning on blending in the excess wash rather than removing it, then the process is slightly more involved. Using a clean pointed brush of any type, you start off by soaking it with white spirit and then removing some of it on a paper towel so that your brush is damp but not drenched. Then, as shown in the video, introduce the thinners into the areas you want to blend and use circular movements to start loosening it up and integrating it with the surface. Your brush will start picking up a lot of the oil paint throughout this process, so it's a good idea to frequently clean it off and reload it with a white spirit. Once you think you've achieved a good result, allow the thinner to dry off for another half hour before coming back to check for any tide marks or irregularities that you didn't notice whilst it was wet. If there's anything undesirable, simply repeat the process until you're happy. With your wash now beautifully applied, the final stage is sealing it in so it can't be damaged by any of the following layers or effects. Before applying a final varnish layer, however, make sure to let it dry for at least 24 hours, allowing the oil paint to fully dry in that time. This is especially important if you're planning on hand brushing a varnish layer on top. The type of varnish itself doesn't matter at all, however I'd steer clear of anything that is oil based, as the risk of reactivating the wash is still somewhat there. Oil varnishes are very rare in the modelling world, however, so I doubt you'll have that issue. With the varnish applied, you're done. I really hope you found this guide useful and that I covered all the topics you were inquisitive about, so make sure to let me know in the comments if you think there's something I missed. Equally, if you'd like me to elaborate on any of the points I mentioned in the video, I'd be more than happy to help out in the comments down below. I'd like to take a moment now to say a massive thanks to all of my amazing Modelling Weekly channel members. Your support is absolutely invaluable and I can't thank you all enough. If you'd like to find out more about what being a channel member entails, feel free to hit that join button down below for more info. Thank you all so much for watching. As I said before, I really hope you found it useful, so if you did, don't forget to leave a like, as it will help the video in reaching more aspiring modelers out there. That's it from me today, so I hope to catch you all next time. Bye.